Hello and welcome to what I expect to be probably the largest video I've ever put together on this YouTube channel. It's not going to be very polished. It's going to be feeling more like you're looking over my shoulder as I'm putting together a content strategy for a project, because we're going to be indeed talking about content. It's something that I think is one of the most important things in all of crypto marketing. And I'll explain why before we dive into actually constructing a strategy. So what we're doing today is I've actually picked a project. We're going to be making a content strategy for them so that you can watch me in action, let's say. But let's start in the beginning. So why is content so freaking important? Well, you have your project, right? And you have different groups of audiences that you would like to take different types of actions, right? So you might have a group of people that they are where they are right now, and you would like them to buy your token. There's another group of people, maybe you're a layer two or something, where you would like them to create applications on your chain, right? And then you have just a bunch of different groups of people like that. And there's the where they are side of things, and then there's the where you would like them to be, meaning the action that you would like them to take. And it's very rare, right, that you are satisfied here in terms of you're getting enough people to do what you want them to do, which means that we're always dealing with a gap. Or another way to think about it is a bridge. So you've got the group of people where they are, you've got the end goal in mind. So let's take investors, for example. You would like people to, let's say, purchase and stake your token. What is that gap made up of? What is the bridge between where they are and them taking the action? Well, from my perspective, it's about information, and you could say information and beliefs. I like to think about it like that, but even beliefs are, it's really information, right? So it is our job to provide information that gets people to have certain beliefs and to inform people enough to come to a decision around the thing that we want them to do. And what most are doing is there is absolutely no strategy in place whatsoever that has charted who are these different groups of people? What are the different, layers of sophistication or awareness between a group? Like, let's say there's a group of people that you want to buy your token. Well, within that group, there's different levels of awareness, right? So you can't treat them all the same. And what are the things that they would have to know? Like, what are the things that somebody might have to believe in order for the likelihood of them purchasing our token to go up, right? Well, you might have things like it would probably be a good thing if they understood what we were trying to do. It would probably be a good idea if they believed that the demand for what we do is going to be tremendously, higher in the future than it is right now. And that's where market narratives come into place, for example. It would probably be a good idea if we had a DeFi protocol that people had a belief that the security on our platform was taken extremely seriously and was just, battle tested constantly, right? There's all kinds of things where if you kind of start with that end in mind and say, here's a group of people, here's the action I want them to take, what are the things that would have to happen in order for that to come true, right? What are the beliefs they would have to have? What are the things that they have to know in order for this to happen? That's a very, very simple place to start where you're going to get just with your own brain, not even using ChatGPT, you're going to come up with some pretty useful answers. And the way that you're going to express those answers, produce those answers and hand them to people is through content. It's going to be written stuff, it's going to be videos, it's going to be images. Maybe you like one form over the other, totally up to you. But that's why content is so important. So now we've kind of laid the foundation here for why this stuff matters, and maybe like even, because I think you could probably define content differently. I just think about it as, information, right? We're producing information in order to deliver to people to get them to arrive at the conclusions that we want them to arrive at, right? So that kind of concludes our intro in that respect. And the next thing that we have to do is essentially to create a content strategy. And so, how do we do that? Well, it starts off by listing our different audiences, as I kind of touched on in the beginning. Then we're going to be breaking down each audience into different awareness levels based on Eugene Schwartz framework that I've talked about in the past. Then we're also, we're going to be looking at, okay, well, now we know who we're targeting. We've broken it down into different segments. This allows us to kind of come up with ideas for what kinds of content we need to be producing in order to, once again, get them across the bridge. And then we're also going to go into the distribution side. We're actually going to think about, here's the group of people. Here's the, once again, you have different levels of awareness within a group of people. So the most aware versus the unaware, as we're getting into the distribution side of things, now we're starting to think about, where did these people hang out? Like, where can I get in front of them? Because obviously a huge part of content is not just the production of the content or the message. It's about, how do I get it in front of people? So that's the next thing that we're going to dive into. And just generally having a very good idea of, here's what moves people from the left side of the bridge to the right side. Who are the target audiences? How are we going to get in front of them? Like, where are they actually hanging out? And then if we really want to get fancy, we're going to end up with a huge, like, the content strategies that I usually create for projects that I've kind of been employed at or worked as a consultant. They are long. They are like 20 pages long, because this stuff is like, it's endless. And that being said, it's like quite rare that you're going to actually get to the point where you're producing the content for every single subset target audience that's on your content strategy. So point being, you're going to end up with like a long to-do list, and then we obviously want to prioritize. So we want to think in terms of like, who's the most important, what's the lowest hanging fruit, and kind of starting there, right? And we may or may not get to actually start talking about production. I think that's kind of like just obvious. So maybe there's some nuggets here and there, but I will probably spend more of my time just with you figuring out the actual strategy itself and the distribution side, which is also obviously super important. With that, I will conclude this intro and we'll jump into part 2. I need to catch my breath because, once again, this is going to be a beast of a video. But let's now continue and dive into the actual creation of the content strategy. Okay. Let's dive into things. So the project that I've chosen that we're going to do this for is called megaeth.com. And I will be honest with you, I have kind of like seen them around on Twitter a little bit. I have no idea what they do, what they're about. And this is kind of like on purpose here. So let's find out real quick. MegaETH is the first real-time blockchain leveraging extreme node specialization to eliminate block gas limits and unlock continuous compute for developers. 130,000, 132,000 followers. That's pretty cool. Let's check the engagement real quick. Like, without diving deeper, the numbers look very good. I love their branding, like from a visual perspective. I'm not really here to do a deep dive on whether this is like legit or not, but first impressions are awesome. In any case, we are going to be making a content strategy for MegaETH. Like I said, I don't know what the project does until I just read about it. I don't know anybody there. It was just a project that came up on my list, and I decided that that's who we're going to use. So what do we need to make a content strategy? Well, hopefully, if you are watching this, you have been watching maybe some of my other stuff, and you are either a founder or a marketer. And I really hope that if you're a marketer, you understand the importance of knowing your target audience. Hopefully, that's true if you're a founder as well. But really, if you are a marketer, this should be your, your holy Bible, essentially. Like, this is the source of all your solutions, let's say. So we need to know our target audiences. And I say it like that because, as we all know, many crypto projects have multiple target audiences. Then we need to know, this is where maybe like some of the stuff from my book really comes into play. So we talked briefly about like understanding kind of like what moves people from one side to the other. So let me just do this. So we're going to draw this kind of bridge that I was talking about. So we've got these two things happening. And let's see if we can turn this into a bridge. Whee! Point I'm getting to is, what are these building blocks made up of, right? If we want people to go from one side of the bridge, man, this bridge is just getting worse the more I'm drawing, but that's okay. I think you get the point. We want people to go from where they are, right? From step one to step two. What are the building blocks that actually get them from one to two? That's sort of like one of the major things that we have to know. So if we know who our target audiences are, we know what the building blocks are to building those beliefs and sort of like what information is actually important to them. And then we know as well like where they hang out. Uh, I like to call it the biker bar. So screw it, I'll just call it here. The biker bars. Biker bars. These are sort of the things that we have to know. So there's three things, and let's type them out to make it faster. Who are the target audiences? What do they need to know, believe? And three, where do they hang out? Very good starting point, right? Like if we know these things, can you see how like it's going to be pretty easy to come up with a strategy that is going to have some form of impact? I can definitely see that. Let me delete this because this now is unnecessary. So this is our bridge. This is what we need to figure out in order to start putting our actual strategy together. So let's start with the target audiences. And screw it, we might just use ChatGPT too. So let's do that. Why wouldn't you? So who are the target audiences? I think we are going to make it simple here. As I mentioned briefly before, like these plans can become so long because of this. But we'll keep it pretty simple. So I'm going to say investors, and I'll call it retail investors, right? So let's say that these are people that we want to buy our token, retail investors, and then let's say developers. Because between these two things, you can really get a lot done, right? If you're able to attract people to build on your chain and you're actually able to attract capital, the sky's the limit, right? In terms of what you can do. Users and all that, certainly what we want long term, right? But let's start here, but also let's do something fun with ChatGPT. So let's say you were making a content strategy for megaeth.com. For starters, who are their target audiences? So we're going to use this the way that I like to use ChatGPT, which is that it's a tool to amplify what you already have. You want to start off with your own ideas, and then you want to tap ChatGPT or whatever AI you like, to add some ideas to the table and so on and so forth. Regardless of what it says, we're going to keep it to retail investors and developers, but let's just see what it comes up with. It's incredibly slow though. So let's just continue here in the meantime. So we've got the first high level target audiences, and then we have this concept, right, of market awareness levels. I've talked about it in the past, and we could really do this where I delete these and we say that there's 5. Let's do it like this. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is Eugene Schwartz. awareness levels. So first, we have most aware. Or do I start off? Let's start off at the other end. We have the unaware. We have the problem aware. We have the solution aware. We have the product aware. And then we have the most aware. So that's kind of going from the left to the right. And this means essentially that any target audience that you have, you can break them down by this. And the more you start to think about this, the more you start to define these things, the more you start to realize that, yes, indeed, I cannot treat, even though we're talking about retail investors, I cannot treat, the level 1 awareness the same as the most aware, because these are very different. And I also kind of want to translate this to crypto. So if we're talking like a Web 2 thing here, like the unaware is somebody who they're just walking around, they're not even thinking about the problem that you can solve. Problem aware is somebody who's like, I have this problem with, I'm not getting enough customers in my business, right? A solution aware is somebody who's like, um, Google advertising might solve my problem, right? I'm not getting enough customers. If I ran some Google search ads, maybe I would actually get more people to show up, right? Product aware would be, okay, I wanted to use Google Ads. I don't know how to do it myself, so I'm going to hire an agency or a freelancer. And I've seen, I've got a list of 10 of them, right? And the most aware is sort of just like, okay, I've kind of like reviewed all the options. I've made my choices. I've got my criteria for choosing a solution, and I've gone through the list, and that's my solution, right? That's one way to kind of see this funnel, if you will. Let me see here what's going on. So, developers and enthusiasms, traders, supporters, NFT collectors and creators. Yeah, classic like super BS ChatGPT stuff. No value added here, but that's fine. We can leave it at this. So if we were to think about this in crypto terms, I think I might do like no awareness. It's always hard to like define these because like there's such a big difference between different types of crypto projects. Knows the problem they have. So this is not even like a crypto definition. It's just a more fleshed out version. Knows a solution. Keyword a solution, not the solution. A lot of problems have many solutions, right? Exploring and choosing option. And then the most aware, you could say this is an active participant. I think that's maybe a good way to think about it in crypto terms. So I may want to blow this up a bit. Let me move that up. And then retail investors, that's the one that we're going to start with first. So now I'm going to start to introduce you to a couple of things. We talked earlier about like, okay, we're talking in terms of retail investors. We've got these different levels. So maybe we'll just copy this whole thing and start sort of like populating it. And then we're going to dive into like, okay, well, what are the building blocks for these people? And that's actually what I want to get into now. So this is also something that's like a little bit difficult to do in a sort of template manner where you can apply it perfectly to any kind of crypto project. It's going to be a little different. So if we have, man, I really hate this font. Is there another font? Oh, hell yeah. Let's go with the fancy one. Crucial for me to feel good. That wasn't the one. So I think the easiest thing to do here is to start off with the two extremes. So the most aware, this is an active participant. These are people who are already in crypto, right? They're already actively buying and selling other tokens. And it's our job now to get them interested in what we have to do, in what we have to offer. So I would say the first thing that would be good for them to believe in is high future demand. That would be very useful for us to have them believe that our project and our token is going to be in higher demand in the future. That also entails probably that they understand our tech. They would have to understand our utility, so the actual problem that we solve. Ideally, we would have answered security questions or concerns, although that's generally not going to be a huge one. One thing that would be really important is that they understand our vision and what we're trying to do. And another thing that's very, very useful is social proof and FOMO. I will put urgency here as well. It's something nice to have. And it's not like you go and make content about urgency. So I might actually skip that one because, like, what does that look like? I think tokenomics maybe are becoming increasingly more important because when we were all uneducated in crypto, you would just buy into a token because you liked something about the project. And then after a while, you realized, like, hey, this is a reward only token. I'm getting screwed. Like, where's the value accrual, you know? I would say that there's other things here at play as well. So, from a branding perspective, in terms of associating us with other things, I'm going to say partnerships and associations. And I'm also going to say authority and credibility. And I'm not going to leave all these here. I'm actually going to end up spreading them out into the other subcategories. And then at the top here, I'm going to put storytelling. And I believe storytelling is one of those things that we have to make a video about at some point because this is, again, one of those words that, like, crypto marketers are throwing around all the time. Nobody is able to, like, say what they actually mean by it. Nobody's able to provide, like, a blueprint of, like, how do you do storytelling. There's just a general misunderstanding. And by the way, I see this from crypto marketers that you're all looking up to, that to me, there's levels of sophistication in anything. And I had this tweet the other day that I got from somewhere else, which is kind of like, you can't see beyond your level of sophistication, right? Like if I'm watching two jujitsu guys in a UFC fight, I I don't see the magic that's happening because I don't really like get jujitsu. I don't have years of experience. I can't see that he was trying to do that and he saw it and he blocked it, or like he, changed position. Like the same goes for anything. And so what I'm seeing a lot, by the way, in crypto marketing is like all these people that others are looking up to that are in like the crypto marketing cabal, they know fuck all about marketing. And it's kind of like upsetting, but at the same time, who gives a shit? So anyway, there's people that you look up to that are talking about storytelling in terms of like this is the solution to all your problems. It's not the case. Like storytelling has a very specific purpose in marketing. And I've outlined it here. I've outlined it in a video before where I say that storytelling is what you want to use when you're trying to attract a relatively unaware audience, right? You don't get a product aware person to into the most aware stage. Like you don't get somebody who already knows about what you do and what your future looks like and all this, like across, like to get them. Um, what's the saying? Across the fence, let's say, to push them over the edge, right? To make a purchase, to do whatever. You don't do that with storytelling, right? So storytelling has its place, but it's not some apply anywhere like solution to all your marketing problems in crypto. And the example that I give in my other videos is Drive to Survive, right? So if you end up in a hyper competitive, let me reel back for just a second because this is important. Each one of these levels gets larger in terms of the amount of people. So the most aware is the smallest group of people. And then the product aware is like a larger group of people. And so the unaware is always the largest by far, right? And so that's something that we're seeing right now in crypto too, is like everybody's been fighting over the breadcrumbs of the most aware people. They're like trying to, steal 1% of a competitor instead of going, after a much, much larger audience, which is the unaware people. And so coming back to Drive to Survive on Netflix, the reason they did that show was because they wanted to expand their, you know, user base and revenue, right? And so they're in the sports industry. Like, can you imagine competing in an industry? Our industry has been around for like, what is it, 16 years? Sports has been around since like the beginning of time. Can you imagine how much more competition there is in an industry that's been around since the beginning of time versus something that's been around for 16 years that's incredibly tech heavy, right? So the problem that they're faced with is like, how do we compete at this point? Well, you resort to storytelling, right? Because that's what allows you to go out there and target those unaware people. And you do it because human beings, just for whatever reason, through evolutionary biology, we just love a good story, right? It's entertainment, and it captures our attention, and that's why it's a good tool for marketing, because you can go after the largest amount of people, and you can trick them to pay attention to you using storytelling. So in Drive to Survive, you're following different personalities, right? You're following different drivers, and you're also following different team principles. And there's all kinds of like, you know, drama and dynamics happening. And there's many different storylines because you have all these different people that you're following, which is great. And that's how they pull you in. And so once again, I have a separate video on it. You can go watch it if you want. But that's the storytelling side of things. So there's a time and a place for storytelling. It's usually going to also, you know, require a lot more from you and so on and so forth. So it's usually not the thing I'm going to default to. But if you have a founder who's willing to build a personal brand, absolutely, like kind of like get the basics of storytelling and just kind of have this continuous thing where they're sharing like what they're trying to do and the things that they're struggling with. It's very, very powerful to keep people, to first of all trick them into paying attention to you, and to do so over a longer period of time. And because then you have their attention, right? And then you can deploy that towards what you need. So I think this is like the full list basically that we can focus on for now. And then what I would likely do is kind of distribute these into the different buckets, right? So if we were to think about this in terms of uh, a journey where you come in as an unaware person, what would like what would a journey look like that actually makes sense for a random person? So if they came in because they heard about what we were trying to do, like let's say I'm a founder, I've got my personal brand, I do some thread about, hey, you know, I quit my job 5 years ago and like dove into crypto, and now I'm building this thing, and like I'm dealing with XYZ, and it's like it's crazy. And you watch that, and so now we've caught their attention. And so now let's say I'm building Mega ETH. So like what might the problem look like, the problem aware from a content perspective, what might the information look like that we would serve to them next? So you could certainly talk about utility, but we're really talking about utility in a way where a problem comes first. So that's another thing um, that we have to define. And that's actually a really important pillar to add as well. So we want to talk about the problems that we're solving. So the utility is really going to come in the next section, isn't it? So this is the solution, right? And now in product aware, we can come back and see if there's stuff we want to add. This is where we want to add stuff about like, so the tech, I'll wait about that. High future demand. I might actually put that. That's like market narratives, right? I'll put that in here. We're going to explain all this shit in a bit. High future demand, so let's remove that. I think the tech, we can get into the solution. Utility and tech, we've got, I might put security here just because we're like, that's where we're kind of like starting to dive deeper and deeper. Vision, I might put here at the, I'll put it in the solution side. And don't worry if you're not following just yet. Social proof and FOMO, that's really stuff that we want to have at this point, right? That's where like people are really showing interest, and we got to like get them across the fence. Tokenomics, yeah, probably put that here. Partnerships and associations, that's kind of in the social proof side as well, you could say. And authority and credibility, put that here. So here, you know, you could put like comparisons and stuff, like comparisons, urgency, whatever, discounts, although that's a very slippery slope, right? And what does that even mean in the context of crypto? Who knows? But I think at this point, what we have outlined to some degree are the building blocks of the bridge. These are some of the things that if we were able to get these things across, the likelihood of the person getting over to the other side is now significantly higher than it was not long ago. So if I think we have to look deeper into Mega ETH before I dig into my if I statement. So what problem does Mega ETH solve? Man, ChatGPT is spinning today. Super slow. I will take a quick break here and come back. You don't have to watch me do it, but let's chat in a bit. Okay, we are back. I had a quick break, and ChatGPT was able to provide me an answer with what the hell does Mega ETH do? Mega ETH addresses Ethereum's scalability challenges. Oh, never heard that one before. By offering a high-performance Layer 2 solution designed to significantly enhance transaction throughput and reduce latency. Ethereum's mainnet processes 15 to 30 per second transactions, and we are talking 100,000 TPS. Okay, it's not very novel, but that's okay. We're not here to judge them. We are here to help them. So if Mega ETH was my client and the whole thing that we're doing is, enhancing transaction throughput and reducing latency, the challenge here is going to be there's like 1,000 other projects that are trying to play that same card, but that's okay. We can crush them with marketing. And I will tell you what, this is absolutely the way that they win this game is through superior marketing. It's not going to be like a better product. So here's what we have to think about. If we come back to this and we are talking about problem definition and high future demand, like, let me ask you, dear viewer, have you heard of other chains whose, USP is like, higher throughput and reducing latency, right? It's not a new USP. So the real it's not even a challenge, but the real task here at hand is to connect this to real life situations. And like nobody just wants 100,000 TPS. But like why do I need that? Why am I really struggling with the current chains that are available in terms of TPS? Is that hindering me on a daily basis? For the most part, absolutely not, right? And so the way that you solve this is really heavily reliant on the future and heavily reliant on painting a picture of the future where this is going to increase in demand, right? Where the problem that you're like barely noticing right now is going to be amplified to the point where you can't stand it anymore. And of course, the underlying assumption here is not only that, but you can also profit from the fact that, in the future, everyone's going to be pissed off by the problem with, transaction throughputs. So everyone's going to be using Mega ETH. And because of that, our token is going to go up in value, right? That's the underlying assumption that we get people to arrive at, or the conclusion that we get people to arrive at with our content. So now what Mega ETH has to do is just continue to provide like mountains of evidence and stories of what's coming in the future that allows or that makes this problem bigger than it is today, because it's not a big problem today. And the other thing that I've noticed here is like, when I first got into Web3, I didn't understand the importance of narratives because I was coming from a different, from like the Web 2 world where that stuff is like relevant basically. So the thing that you have to realize is that Narratives is all about, well, when I say narratives, I mean market narratives. There's all kinds of different narratives, right? But when we're talking about market narratives, we're talking about what is going to happen in the future. Like what problems are going to get larger, getting people to arrive at the conclusion on their own that, like, hey, I believe those things are going to be true. That means I can make money by participating in this thing early. If I believe that AI is going to require just way more compute in the future, well, then Nvidia might make sense to buy as a stock, right? That's exactly what we saw when people sort of realized that, like, oh, this thing is just the beginning. Like, this is going to get much bigger. We're going to need a lot of GPUs. What does that mean for companies like Nvidia? Oh crap, the demand is gonna like 100x in the future. They're gonna make boatloads more money. Mega ETH needs to do that same thing. So now the question becomes, and this is where it's really useful to have AI, because now what you want to do is start thinking about and providing evidence of the things that are going to be driving transaction volume. And some of those things I know because I've been researching it myself. First of all, if you look at the history of payments and sort of like how many payments were happening on a daily or annual basis, that number is like a very linear chart. It's just going up and up and up and to the right. So there's no reason to think that that's going to decrease, especially where like the cost of a transaction is basically coming down to close to zero. And if you just take something like people's salary, right? Like we used to get paid once a month. And look, the only reason for that was because it was a pain in the ass for like from an admin point of view to like go and pay people, right? But if the transaction cost almost nothing, and if it was automated, why wouldn't people just get paid like every block or get paid automatically once a day, right? We're definitely going to see that more and more. It's already happening, right? But this means that the amount of transactions that are happening on a daily basis is going to continue to vastly increase. The other thing that I think is interesting is you have AI and robotics, right? Where there's going to be transactions happening that are done by those entities, and that's also going to you also have like IoT, right? Like Internet of Things, where your washing machine like realizes that it's run out of detergent and is going to place an order on Amazon for for more detergent, like the number of transactions is definitely going to increase, and that's the thing that Mega ETH has to like put in people's faces. What you cannot do is walk around thinking that people are going to know these things themselves. Like you have to pull all this stuff, make it fun, make it exciting, make it interesting, package it together so that I can watch it in a fun short documentary or something, or a research report, and like put it in front of people. So when it comes to content, like that's the main thing from sort of a mega ETH market narrative perspective. That's the thing that they have to do, because the problem that they're solving is not actually a problem that we're all feeling currently. But if you can make us believe that in the future it's going to be a huge problem, now we're interested in getting involved, right? So that was the market narrative side. So the problem definition also is very technical. It's like you have to tie this into real life use cases for people to care. So right now, this is like, if you tell this in its current form to somebody who is problem aware, mind you, they just came off of a story, right? Like they might not even like know much about crypto. There's a huge disconnect if you tell that story. So let's say somebody found an interesting story about the founder of Mega ETH. They kind of like took the next step of finding out more about what they're about, and they saw they're not into crypto, and they saw this like, hey, we're increasing transaction throughput and reducing latency, and our goal is 100,000 TPS. That person is freaking gone, like not interested, right? Completely lost them. So that's where some of the stuff I was talking about in terms of market narratives can kind of is almost also like storytelling in a sense, right? And that's something that we can keep going here, where we can also throughout the storytelling, we're introducing the problem here of the thing that's going to be happening in the future. So once we've done that, now we've sort of like laid a foundation for here's where things are going, here's why we need to exist. We know it's not a big problem today, but like it's coming, the problem's going to get worse every day. Just continuing to show proof that it's getting worse, and like showing like Ethereum, gas fees, screenshots and stuff like that, like people used to do. Then we can get into the solution. So now we can talk about some of these things. This is going to be for the people who want to nerd out, but it kind of explains how it works. So this is actually the kind of stuff that would be pretty interesting for a lot of people if it was made easier to understand. So like using very simple illustrations and like putting it into an easy to understand video. Because even me, right, like reading about sequencers and full nodes and provers, it's beyond my level of sophistication, right? Now we have vision. So to a degree, we have the vision here in terms of 100,000 TPS. And I've talked about vision a ton in the past, so I'm not going to go on about it too much. But basically, the market narrative is almost like a vision for the industry. It's kind of like here's what's going to happen in the future, and the vision for your project is telling everybody here's where we're aiming, here's what we're trying to do. And if the person believes that the problems that you have outlined are going to increase or amplify over time, and they see that you are aiming to be there at that point, now they can start to form like a pretty good argument for why it's a good idea to invest in your project, right? Okay. So we talk about our solution, we talk about our vision. This is also the tech side, right? So this is where you can completely nerd out on this for the people that want to go super deep. Then we've covered really the big blocks about like the market narrative and the vision and the solution. So now we're getting into like increasingly more granular or technological in the content. But also we're introducing social proof and FOMO, which we could arguably do earlier because at this point people should be getting excited about what we do. And if you guys know any of my previous work, you will know that I believe that social proof is the most potent driver of affecting other people's human behavior. Other people's behavior is a better way to put that. My TLDR of that, which is all outlined in my book, pretty detailed, is that I believe the first driver of human behavior is biology, right? We are biologically wired to want to reproduce, right? And that's why we place such a big importance on security. So that's the first thing that we want in life, right? Our bodies, if just left on their own, they would just be like, oh, we got to reproduce. We just got to stay alive, essentially. And how do we do that? Well, we literally stay alive, but we also reproduce. That way, our species can survive. Then you get into, if you go beyond just the body, we go into the brain and thinking and beliefs, right? So now we're talking about psychology. So my point is that first, at the base layer, we have biology, then we have psychology. So what we're having is like people whose bodies want to reproduce, but their brains are telling them otherwise. I want to focus on my career, or I get enjoyment out of XYZ, or I'm really scared about where the world is going. I don't know if I want to take on the responsibility of bringing human beings into this planet that I'm not sure I can provide for, right? The psychology is overruling the biological desire. And then the third level is social psychology. So the social psychology can overrule the psychology, which can overrule the biology. But the most important lever, the most potent, the strongest, is actually the social psychology, so it's the behavior of other people. So that's where experiments where people are kind of like, well, first of all, to just tie it back to what we just spoke on, I'm sure that there's many people that are not having children because all of their friends are not having children, right? And And the opposite would have been true too, right? Back in the day, where like if everybody else was having children, you would have children because everybody else was having children. But there's these experiments specifically too that you may have seen where there's an elevator, there's like 5 actors in there, they're facing away from the door, which is unnatural. They get an unpaid actor or like a non-actor, normal person to step into the elevator to see how they react. And most of them hesitate a bit and then they turn around and face the same wall that everybody else in the industry is facing, which is like unnatural. The other one is a classroom. Again, let's say 19 paid actors. They have like smoke coming out of one of the walls to sort of indicate that there's a fire going on. How does this other person who's not a paid actor, how do they react if everybody else is not reacting to what obviously seems like a fire? And how do they mostly react? Well, they don't say anything. They conform, right? So that's my point. That's obviously, this is like stuff that we all kind of inherently know, but I like to nerd out on the actual, psychology and biology side of things. And so that's where, that's why it's so important and it's so powerful to get other people on the bandwagon, right? Because it's like the most easiest way to get other people to do the same thing, because we also like take shortcuts, like instead of just like going through the storytelling and understanding the future demand and understanding the tech, like, oh, all of my buddies are into this, I'm gonna get into this too, right? It's just like the biggest shortcut on the planet. So that's why you also want to just like go out of your way to get more social proof and to put it in front of people, right? Just because you have 7 testimonials doesn't mean that other people know about them. So you want to make content out of them, put it in front of people. Building on that, we also have partnerships and associations. So this is where we are, it could just be partnership announcements, but you can add credibility to what you're doing with associating with other reputable projects and people and so on and so forth. And we also have tokenomics that I've described. This is where, in an ideal point of view, from a marketer perspective, you can kind of point to the tokenomics and say, like, hey, look, if what we say comes true in terms of the narrative, if where we're aiming, we're able to, pull off a fraction of what we're trying to do, inherently, this can actually mean that the token is going to go up in value because we are, making $100 million and we're taking X% of it and putting it back into the token, for example, right? Versus like, hey, this is a reward only token. Like, that's not the best argument, right? To get people to invest in a token. Now we have authority and credibility. So this is where you're bringing up symbols of credibility, and like I said, this could also mean like partnerships and other people and partners that you're associating with. It could also mean like, hey, I went to Harvard. It could also mean like, hey, I won this hackathon. It could mean all kinds of things. Like, hey, this guy has X amount of followers, right? We just talked about how social proof matters in terms of shortcutting people's judgment of you. So these are all things, and I'm kind of going through this with speed, but essentially what you would do at this point is you would go through each of these topics. And the other one that we need to add here, which may be baked into social proof, is traction. So this could also be, like use cases and testimonials and things of that nature, right? You would go through each of these and you would effectively brainstorm, what could we do to sort of get a favorable outcome in terms of like how do we get people to think of us as an authority? Well, I would post my talk from Token 2049. Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, we have this Token 2049 talk from the founder. We haven't clipped it up into like 10 different shorts and a long form video and some quotes and some images. Like, that's content right there that's adding authority and credibility to your project, which makes people think that you're more likely to actually pull off the thing that you're trying to do with regards to your vision, right? And then with the most aware, I'm kind of like, whatever. I don't really necessarily love the idea of like doing comparisons. Maybe if it comes from a third party, it's good. Urgency is not really something you make content about, but of course, if you have deadlines and stuff in order to get people involved, that is good. But I'm hoping that right now you can see that we went through sort of a natural journey for what a person might go through as they find out about the project and then potentially go through a journey of like getting converted into somebody who wants to purchase a token. So if, by the time I'm here, by the time I'm like product aware, I believe certain things are going to come true in the future. I believe that your project is going to be well positioned for that future, right? You're actually going to benefit from those problems that are coming in the future. In fact, like the demand for what you do is going to increase because of those things, which inherently also means that more people are going to be using your token, which means that more people are going to want to buy your token, which means if I buy it now, that might be a good thing, right? I also so like I believe some things to be true about where things are going in the future. I believe I have a pretty clear idea of like what you're trying to do and how that fits into that future. I have like a basic understanding of how you're trying to solve this problem, and it like makes sense to me. Like, I'm not super tech savvy, but like I kind of get it, right? I believe that it's a secure platform. Like I'm not gonna like lose my money if I buy some tokens. Um, Very importantly, I believe that like loads of other people also think this is going to happen. And I'm seeing evidence all around me because you won't shut up about it, by the way. I'm seeing your traction too. And, we tend to like Newton's laws of physics, right? And things that stand still, we expect to keep standing still. And things that are in motion, we expect them to keep moving, right? So that's why traction and use cases and just kind of like seeing the snowball effect is useful, because we can now start to think that like, yeah, I believe in this crew. They've been able to build a little bit of momentum. It's probably going to continue. They're associating with other like, top tier projects and people. That's a good sign. Tokenomics wise, it's not a reward token. I'm not going to just get drained. And you have like unlocks and stuff in here too, right? So if I see that like 10% of your supply is unlocked and 90% is going to get dumped over the next 2 years, not ideal, right? I understand why some projects have to play their cards that way because they have VC investors and whatnot. But if you do, probably don't want to brag about it. Authority and credibility. I saw like the token 2049. Like the founder seems like a cool guy. He's freaking smart. It's like, I believe in this guy, and so on and so forth. You can start to see how we started off with like, I have no idea how to actually like convert somebody into a token holder, to something pretty systematic where, sure, is everybody going to convert because of this? No. Do they have a pretty solid argument now for buying the token if we've gone through all these troubles and put this content in front of people? Yes. Yeah, like a decent chance, right? And the other thing too here, before we switch over to the next phase of this, which is like, where do they all hang out? And we also kind of want to discuss the developers actually, briefly, is you don't just make one piece of content for each of these things and release it once and then call me 6 months later and say, hey, this isn't working. No. Like, to put it like pretty simply, don't shut up about these things. Like, just don't shut up about them. Like, keep talking about them. You make like 12 pieces of content around your vision. You make like 48 pieces of content around the market narrative that you're trying to attach yourself to. You make like 58 pieces of content where people are driven to believe that you're a credible person. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you just make a piece of content for each one of these and then you're done. It's like you make endless piece of content for all of these and you won't shut up about it, and you're retweeting the same content that did well in the past, and you're repurposing it for different platforms, and you're taking long form stuff and turning it into mid form and short form, and you're making a video into a written art. Like, this is like endless ammunition right here. Okay. So now let's do it for the developers as well. I'll go a little bit faster, but you can maybe see how we're taking the same process and applying it for a different target audience. Okay, so let's do the developers real quick. I am not a developer, which most of you know. So I'm going to definitely get a little bit of help from ChatGPT here. Storytelling, we can still work, but the thing that I've come to realize, which again is in my book, is that developers or people with that sort of engineering analytical brain are generally very, very different from your average person. And so this is why engineers are so freaking bad at marketing, is because they think that other people think like them, but the average person definitely doesn't think like them. And this is also why people like myself make for terrible engineers, because once again, engineers are just incredibly analytical and like just logic driven, right? So we have logic and emotion. And if you just go and study, like, what are the most successful ad campaigns in forever, right? And then you just go and look at those ads, and you're going to find that they're all just very, very emotionally driven ads, because the average person is generally going to be driven by emotion much, much more, at least at first. And we use, so the way that we like to say it is that people sort of, they make their decision using emotion, and then they justify the decision afterwards using logic, right? And I find that to be very much true. And so where I'm getting at here is that it's very difficult for an engineer to put themselves in the shoes of an average person. And it's very difficult for a person like me to put myself into the shoes of an engineer who, to apply this concept to a crypto context. The engineer is sort of trained to think like, how do we build this product, so that it never breaks? And it's like, is this thing true? And like the favorite example that I've seen once, which is like very extreme, but there was like a pop-up, like a pop-up, like somebody clicked like, cancel my subscription or something, and a pop-up comes up and it's like, do you want to cancel your subscription? And there's two buttons, and the both buttons say cancel and cancel. Like, I want to cancel my subscription cancellation uh journey, meaning I changed my mind, I don't want to cancel my subscription. Or the second button, which also says cancel, means like, yes, I want to cancel my subscription. That's like a silly example where, like, if you were just a hardcore engineer with like zero ability to think outside of that, you could look at that and go like, this is true. Like, it makes sense to write cancel on both buttons, because I'm canceling the pop-up or I'm canceling my subscription. So this is where, like, if you have some complete, just ultra autist, right? They might look at that and not have any alarm bells go off. Whereas, like, if you add just a little bit of like human touch in there, you go, yeah, people aren't gonna, this is gonna be a problem, right? Because we have cancel and cancel, and they mean totally different things. Anyway, I'm kind of like being sidetracked here, but my point is that engineers are very much just kind of trained to look at things to see if they're true or not, and like building things from like the cost of your mistakes in engineering is so high. Like, hey, we're gonna build a bridge. If it doesn't work, then whatever. Like, doesn't work like that, right? So it's always about what is true, and just like building things to the point where they don't break. And specifically for marketers, like, I started off this video talking about how freaking important it is to know your target audience. And one thing that I realized as well, like, the best marketers I know, who are not in crypto, by the way, one thing I noticed about, there's two guys specifically that are both my friends that I've also learned a lot from, that have both made millions of dollars. Um, they are just always starting with the emotion. Like, specifically, one of them, I remember he was kind of telling me his process for, writing any kind of copywriting, whether he's writing an email or, doing a headline for a website. He would visualize the person on the other end, and like, what are they doing? Like, what state of mind are they in? And it's like, what do I want them to feel? It's like, I want them to be like excited. And it's like, that's his starting point. It's literally starting about the emotion of the other person, right? Very unengineering like to have that approach, right? So my whole point here is, like, for me to do this correctly certainly helps with something like ChatGPT, but also talking to people like that. So it would be very difficult for an engineer to do what I just did when we're sort of talking more about the average like retail investor, and it'd be very difficult for an average person, like a retail investor or somebody like me, to put myself in the shoes of an engineer, and now thinking in terms of, how do we attract developers? Well, I don't know what's going on in their life. I don't really understand how they process the world. I understand it from a logical perspective, that they're very logically driven, but I'm not operating like that on a daily basis, so it's kind of difficult for me. So, very long rant here, but let me just kind of see what we can do with ChatGPT. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna copy what we did. So I'm gonna say, here's my breakdown for different awareness levels of a crypto retail investor audience, and what types of content we could make for each, to push them, to convert them, let's say, to convert them. Now, I want to do the same, but for a developer audience, which you may know is much more logical and analytical. My goal is for them to build their applications in our ecosystem as opposed to somewhere else. I want you to outline the same way that I did the different awareness levels and what sorts of building blocks with respect to content would convert them. Let's see what we come up with from that. A day in the life of a blockchain developer, kind of like that. The other two are garbage when it comes to storytelling. Problem aware, so pain points, high gas fees, finality, why are devs leaving? Okay, that's kind of interesting. The hidden cost of building on. Yeah, I wouldn't go in that direction of like trying to slam competitors, especially that it's kind of like putting a big emphasis on that. High future demand, so the rise of real-time blockchain apps, the multi-chain future. So this is where we're getting into like decent narratives. But from an engineering perspective, what we would like here is for the engineer or the developer to arrive at the conclusion that, to invest my time and effort into the Mega ETH ecosystem is a good idea, because they're going to have lots of users. There's going to be lots of jobs. Maybe I want to go down that path, and so on and so forth. So you obviously have to think about it in context of what do they want, right? What would make them feel like that's a good idea? What about the solution? So again, very high on the competitor stuff. So this is where, you probably wouldn't want to do that. How Mega ETH reduces cost and improves performance. Kind of boring. Case studies, devs who built on Mega ETH and what they gained. Poorly worded, but absolutely, if you have successful applications on Mega ETH, then you certainly want to highlight the hell out of that. Once again, that's not one piece of content. That's like 38 pieces of content about one guy who crushed it on Mega ETH, what a future built on Mega ETH looks like. Once again, the sort of, I don't know if these are meant to be titles. If so, they're terrible titles, but I do give you an idea of what the content would be. The roadmap, okay, that's definitely good. In terms of vision, we believe devs shouldn't have to compromise on speed. Blah blah blah. Deep dives, how Mega ETH achieves real time. So this is getting into the tech. So maybe that's where we dive a lot more deeper for the developers than the retail investors. Security, sure. Social proof, yes. But once again, I will say this is like, certainly it's not that engineers are impervious to being influenced by, social psychology. But given that they are much more logical and less emotional about it, it'll generally probably have less effect on them. Traction use cases, so that'll still be very useful. Partnerships and associations also kind of help them paint a picture of, being bullish on the chain and its future. I would imagine what they want to avoid doing is building on a chain that doesn't have any users, that doesn't look like they have a road to getting users, that doesn't look like there's a lot of funding support, and that there's not going to be a lot of jobs. So I think it's not Warren Buffett, but his Charlie Munger, who what's it called, like inversion or something, where you start off thinking like, okay, if I so for if I like didn't want to attract any developers, what would I do? Well, I would make sure that we had no users. I would make sure that there was no fun. Like, it's just a very easy way to flip the equation to see what you should do if you flip it. So, yeah, we shouldn't have any users. We shouldn't have any funding. We shouldn't have any jobs for engineers. We shouldn't have any hackathons. We shouldn't have any support. Like, if you just start off there and flip it, think about all the things that would just absolutely not attract any engineers at all, and then you could go back, unflip it and crush it on those variables, right? Anyway, I'll just kind of leave it at this. I'm not gonna continue. I just wanted to bring up the fact that Every audience may be very like there are nuances and differences in the different audiences. And when it comes to like sort of like the average person versus a developer, there's generally very big differences. So you have to take those into account. And this is also why it'll be useful to use something like ChatGPT, but obviously we can't rely on it 100%. Uh, Again, I'm not going to put it in here. I just wanted to show you what it can look like when you make this sort of analysis for another target audience. I kind of forgot one thing here too. It's hopefully obvious. Who are the target audiences? And the other thing that I should have added is what do I want them to do? I already mentioned, like, we talked about the developers in terms of wanting them to build on our chain. We talked about the retail investors in terms of investing in our token, but certainly got to have that in there. So then, what do they need to know and believe? That's kind of like what we went through now. And the final step here, which you probably don't want to like go ahead and start making all this stuff before you finish the whole strategy, because where they hang out might very well dictate the format of your content, right? If you come to the conclusion that like, oh, this audience that I'm trying to attract freaking love YouTube and it's like really by far their main platform, well, guess what? The content that you make should probably be a video. Or like, hey, these guys love to read, maybe it shouldn't be a YouTube video. So you want to go through all of these stuff before you just dive into like making content. So this, you should take the time to go through the whole thing before you actually proceed. That being said, where do they hang out? Is our next thing to look at. By the way, lunch break, I've got to share an awesome recipe. So if you're like me in that you are working a lot, you don't like to go and cook every day and think about all that, but you like a solid lunch, I've got a good one for you. So what I do is I go and buy at the butcher shop, you know, beef and pork ground right together, and then I go and buy like a burrito kind of seasoning mix, right? And I just make a big batch, like 1 kilogram, which would be like 2.2 pounds of that, because it's gonna last a while. And it's also the kind of food that there's some food that like you can reheat it and it's disgusting. Like try to make some chicken and like reheat it the next day and it's like rubber, right? But this is the kind of food where like you make it, you store it away, and then you can just reheat it on the frying pan the next day, just like and it'll taste pretty much as good as it did on the day. So this idea, I'm not done with the recipe, I'm just getting into it. When I lived in Japan, they used to have this thing called taco rice. So it's essentially like taco ingredients but in like a bowl with rice, and it's freaking awesome because you can just boil a bunch of rice so it's ready. You can make the meat so it's ready. You just got to reheat it, and then you can just throw in whatever ingredients you like. So what I do is I have the meat, I have the rice, I do onion, I do sour cream, I do some Tabasco, like a green Tabasco, and then I just put a little bit of cheese in. You could put tomatoes and all kinds of things, but it's like such an awesome meal. You can just make a big batch, and you can literally eat the same thing like 3-4 days in a row, and it's still like it'll take you like 5 minutes to prep it after you've made everything on a daily basis, and it's still like delicious like 3-4 days in. So top tip for me, I'll have to do more of these if you guys like it, but cheers. Super good, spicy. Okay, lunch is done, let's get back to business. So if we want to recap real quick, we've talked about why content or information is important, right? It's how we get people to cross the bridge. We've broken down our target audiences, and we've broken down each target audience into subsets of awareness levels. And then we've looked at the different building blocks that is going to get somebody from the left side over to the right side across the bridge, and what those building blocks might look like in terms of the content that we would create for that, again, for each target audience. And then before we actually start making content, we want to talk about where do they hang out. So we've got our two target audiences, right? So we want to answer that question from there. So for retail investors, we've got also the awareness levels, right? So the platforms may change, but what we can do is we can write retail investors, and then we can do the whole, let's copy this thing. And from here, we can start to outline where these people hang. So if we start with, the most aware, that's where you might see stuff like, DeFi, Llama, or things of that nature. And I'll also tell you why that's useful to know. If you don't know why it's useful to know, you definitely have some stuff to learn when it comes to marketing. So, hold on, my alarm's going off. Oh, yeah, I don't know why. So, the most aware, we might cheat with ChatGPT as well. So let's do that. Let's make it. So going back to the crypto retail audience, now we're looking at distribution channels. Please outline where these people hang out online and do it through the awareness levels categorization. Let's just see, to get the brain flowing. So here we go, YouTube. So this is the unaware, right? I think we'll just end up where they, oh, I hate when ChatGPT uses emojis. I'm not sure why. Okay, so let's see how we went with that. We're gonna judge this in just a moment, but let's see how it does. Okay, so what do we have here? So unaware, it's got general finance and tech channels, but then it's put Coin Bureau in there. So now you're already like you're at the surface level of crypto. I'm gonna remove that. So TikTok and Instagram Reels, Reddit, Twitter. Okay, it only seems to do this from a social media point of view, if you want to count Reddit, Medium, Substack as social media. But what I don't see on here, okay, here are some websites, Token Terminal, doing analytics, but there's no like Google searches, for example. I think maybe that's a main thing that I would add. Um, yeah, I mean, we're all using Google probably much, much less, but that also means that perhaps the Google searches are less relevant. The more aware the subset is that we're talking about, but the more we go into like unaware, the more relevant YouTube still becomes in terms like what if you targeted people on Google ads who are searching what is Bitcoin? Like catch them at the very beginning of their journey. Highly underrated strategy. I'll tell you a quick story about that. So this was written about in a book. It was Target in the US. So Target basically wanted to find out, like the marketing department went to the stats department and said, "Hey, based on like what people are buying, is there a way for you to figure out if somebody's pregnant? Because if we can get them when they're pregnant, they're gonna buy, certain vitamins from us. They're gonna buy diapers from us. They're gonna buy baby food from us. They're gonna buy clothes from us, shoes from us. Like as somebody who's got two kids." if like one store was able to capture capture me throughout that period, like they'll make a lot of money off of me. So like I totally understand where this is coming from. So stats department goes to work. They figure out a way to, I forget what it was. So based on some vitamin that's essentially like, you can buy it if you're not pregnant, but like chances are if you're pregnant and you buy it, sorry, chances are if you buy it, there's a high chance that you're actually pregnant. So they go, okay, well, cool. Like if somebody buys this and this, then like they're probably pregnant. So they go, okay, cool, good to know. Thanks. Marketing department goes to work. They start sending out like specific advertising targeted to pregnant women about like diapers and stuff like that. And then they get an angry phone call from a dad who's like, the fuck is going on? Like, why are you guys sending, pregnancy related advertising to like my 15-year-old daughter? She's a teenager. Like, what the hell's wrong with you? And they're like, "Oh my God, so sorry." Da, da, da. And then like 2 weeks go by, the dad calls back. It's like, so apparently, like some things have been happening in my household that I wasn't aware about. Long story short, they were correct. Like she was pregnant, and they'd correctly identified her and sent her the ad. Now, what was so this is actually to tie this back into what we talked about engineers before. This is like where they didn't consider the emotional side or like the human side of this, right? And so what they did to solve for this was obviously there's still money in the thing that they identified. So what they in order to not make it seem like they had specifically identified that that person was pregnant and they wanted to send them pregnancy related ads, they would stick those ads into like a catalog of ads, right? So I don't know if you remember, but back in the day, you used to get those little pamphlets, right? And it would just be like coupons and stuff like that. So they would stick it into there. That way, it like wasn't so blatantly obvious that like this ad, like we know you're pregnant, basically. Here's an ad for it. So super interesting little story about Target. So knowing where your customers hang out and what's going on in their life can be very, very important. So yeah, we've got YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, Twitter, and Google searches. And there's also probably websites, like certain websites that are not here, especially if they're like finance related. This is going to really, once again, it's difficult to do this in a broad strokes kind of way. But if we think about it from the context of Mega ETH, these people are unaware about a problem. It wouldn't necessarily have to be a finance thing, right? It could be related to, like we talked about before, the issue that we're solving for is that uh, we need blockchains with high throughput, low latency. So we have to reverse engineer what the problem is for that. So we talked about the idea of like, AI agents transacting or Internet of Things, right? Like your washing machine transacting and so on and so forth. And so trying to think if there's like a website where this would be kind of relevant information. It may be some sort of like general, finance type of newspapers type stuff. Maybe Wall Street Journal and things of that nature. You could put like, news, Wall Street Journal, Google searches. Um, I mean, I would actually tie this as far back as like what's like AI predictions and stuff like that. I would say AI predictions. Is AI going to XYZ blank? Um, okay, problem aware. So this is somebody who's kind of like they see what's going to happen in the future in terms of blockchains needing to have high throughput and so on. So this is sort of like very surface level KOLs, Altcoin Daily, maybe more of a news organization. These are crypto debate macro investors. Okay, that makes sense. Um, crypto subs. with investment focus. Yeah, I guess I would add again, right? Like Google searches and websites. I would say it's already getting like a little bit deeper into crypto. Like Arthur Hayes is not somebody that you would know if you were like very surface level in crypto, like barely knew what crypto was. Whereas Bankless would be maybe the same level. In general, let's say that the suggestions from ChatGPT is sort of generally not considering. Yeah, so now we have like podcasts. So we have like websites, podcasts, Google searches, and then it's just kind of looking mainly at different social media platforms. But let me see here, the Defiant, and I also think we're kind of missing like crypto specific news outlets, right? Like your CoinDesks or Cointelegraph. The Defiant is a crypto news outlet. Delphi Digital, Messari, more like your research. But that's another one that's sort of missing. So that, yeah, Wall Street Journal, CoinDesk is kind of like where you might add here, right? Like going like a little bit deeper into crypto, Forbes, and so on and so forth. But essentially, to kind of replicate this, I think this would be useful to each one. And I think if you were to do the Google searches thing, like I said, that like the most aware, it would be less relevant because these are sort of generally going to be more tech heavy people that are all of us are increasingly using AI and less Google. Nonetheless, your Google searches that you could target would get increasingly more specific. And the unaware, like I said, would be like, hey, what's Bitcoin? You know, you literally could go after that one. What is Bitcoin? To take it back to target, you know, get them at the beginning of their journey. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to fight like other blockchains for mind share. You just get them at the start, and then you become their religion. Um, yeah, so we have analytics platforms. Okay. So now the next question, like as you can see, I'm not going super deep here. My point more here is to get a little bit of a picture of the landscape, and that when I start to think about platforms, once again, if we go back to like, okay, retail investors, so let's just put another word on that, like average person, like um probably like a little bit of interest in making money, right? Which may not be everybody, but certainly a lot of people. And so in general, they're very much going to like video. If you think about consumption patterns, right? Like consuming video is much less taxing than consuming, writing, right? You can kind of sit back and just watch a video and just be like half asleep, right? You can, and that information is going to get you. It's going to come to you. But to read, it's like you have to go to it and look at the text and transcode that text and like try to comprehend what it's saying. You know, it's much more taxing. And so basically, the more mainstream you get in terms of your target audience, the more you want to rely on video, just because it's visual and audio and not very taxing at all, compared to text, which is like much more taxing and it's only one format, which is text. So absolutely going to be your number one go-to if you want to reach the masses. It's going to be YouTube, you could say. I wanted to say video, but YouTube for sure. And then also you have this kind of idea of, short form and long form. And, it's a little bit of a like, yes, it can be true that to some degree you can use short form because it's more sort of like viral, and like your short form videos are generally going to get more views, and you can try to use that to get people interested enough to try to like search down the rabbit hole. But I just don't know if that really translates very well. Just based on like anecdotal evidence that I have seen, I just don't know if that's very much the case. And I would rather focus on people who display like some kind of interest in what it is that we do and who are willing to, commit to whatever, a 5-minute video or whatever the case. But this is how you want to start thinking about your different ways of reaching people. And the other thing that I'll say here is like you have to be realistic with what resources you have. Like for me to go out there and properly do YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Reddit and Twitter and like Google and like trying to do banner ads or whatever on websites, it's like I'm not going to be able to do that with a small team. So what you want to do is you want to focus on one, maybe two if it's like low effort to do the second one. Like if you're doing shorts on TikTok, you can almost like pretty much use the same video on Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. But you want to pick one and you want to do that one really well. And the other thing that I'll say is that, and I've made other videos about this too, about like the whole quantity versus quality. Yes, to some degree, there's data in quantity, which kind of helps you navigate or like helps you decide where to go. But the flip side of that coin is like, I know where we need to go. Like, I know where we're going. I'm telling you what you should like. So part of me is kind of like, yeah, I don't give a shit what people show me they like by watching it. It's like, I'm gonna jam what they need to consume down their throats. Like, well, I'm gonna make the video that they need to watch. And 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 it's important to do it well, and it's also, as much as possible, if you can package it with entertainment, you're going to just be able to get, like I said, much more people, and you're essentially tricking people to give you their attention, right, by wrapping the whole thing in entertainment. So those are just kind of broad ideas with regards to your, where they hang outside of things. And I think my main thing here is really for you to pick a channel to do quality instead of quantity. If you have to pick, do quality. To consider search based targeting, like literally, you could do it on YouTube, right? People are searching stuff on YouTube. You could show advertisements based on what they're searching. You could do the same thing on Google. Like people are searching what is Bitcoin. That is an interesting angle for me. If I was working for Mega ETH, I would get to a place where I would eventually do that. But in order to sort of make sure we come back to Mega ETH as well, I think what I would really do is if we go back to the content and now kind of layer it with the different platforms, the most important things for me would be to focus on the narratives because that's not very obvious. So high future demand, I would really make that real, and I would, put as many different narratives in front of them as I could and kind of see if maybe one resonates more than others. I would say that the vision is kind of there in terms of like the TPS, but like, can we maybe expand on that and make it less just super like a number, like 100,000 TPS is the vision and that's it. Um, the other thing about the vision is like it should be so ambitious you'll never get there, because if you got there, you would have to start over, right? And that's not what you want to do. You don't want to change your vision because you were successful. You want to have a vision that you can never reach, but at least it tells people where you're going, because that's the most important part of the vision. It's not about having an achievable vision. It's about telling people where you're aiming. In any case, market narratives would be very big. I would definitely look internally with regards to storytelling. So I would be looking at, well, screw it. Let's find out right now. Who are the founders of Mega ETH? Mega. Here are the founders. Looks like maybe a Chinese team. United States, Chinese names. So these are people who used to work at ConsenSys. What else do we got? Mega ETH co-founder of Stanford. Yeah. So okay, my point was that on the storytelling side, is there a person or several people on the team that would explore building personal brands where, as the person in charge of marketing on the team, that would be my job to kind of like make it all happen. But so let's see, this person's got 35K, so there's probably a bit of a brand here already. Because the other two are 6, 7, so this person is probably actually made content, I would imagine. Paid 200K tuition to Harvard HBS when ETH was $80. Ask me anything. Okay. So this person's like somewhat active. You would have to look internally to see whether they're interested in sort of expanding on the storytelling side. So again, what I'm trying to do is twofold. I'm trying to get attention, and I'm trying to convert that attention to get people onto our bridge and push them across the line. So we're using storytelling where possible. We're going to look internally to see if there's like founding team members that are interested, or maybe other people. We're going to be looking at market narratives, vision stuff for sure. We are probably making content about the tech side of things, which will hopefully be more on the developer side, like in terms of its usefulness. Security side, sure. Social proof and FOMO, traction, use cases, testimonials. This is where I would lean in very heavily, and would probably try to like go out of my way to create marketing campaigns that would actually drive further results in this camp, right? Traction, use cases, testimonials, social proof, et cetera, et cetera. And these would be my sort of starting point to make content for them. And I would probably look to do this on YouTube. And writing wise, probably, I think I saw they have like a Medium or something like that. But the other thing about doing stuff for market narratives is you want to do kind of like research reports, and I would either do that in partnership with something like a Messari or other research firms, where they're helping drive a certain narrative that you want. But you can also publish it yourself, which I've done in the past with projects where like we just didn't have the resources to do it that way, and we just like went out there and built our own narrative and published it on our own blog, and it worked incredibly well. So that being said, I do really think that a ton of my effort, content wise, for Mega ETH would be going into the market narratives, because there's a disconnect right now from my perspective about why what they're doing is going to be important in the future, and you bridge that gap with market narrative stuff. So yeah, obviously Twitter again. I don't know about Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram Reels. Probably not so much. I would look at the sort of unaware audience as well, because market narrative stuff, we're already kind of like a little bit deeper into crypto, and we touched on storytelling in the sense of personal branding. But to think out loud, I'm also wondering if there is like entertainment documentary type stuff, which there is, I'm thinking out loud, that would attract like, your average people, entertain them, and at the same time lay the groundwork for the market narratives that we would want to attach ourselves to. And so what I would do on that front is I would probably produce like YouTube documentary around where everything is going with AI. And I would tie that into the need for high throughput blockchains, because that's a pretty interesting topic. I would like, obviously I'd have to figure out a title and figure out the content of it, but that's something that I could wrap into something so that's storytelling, right? So it's got entertainment, it appeals to the masses, but it also touches on where things are going, and that's where we can bake in the market narratives we want to associate with. And that's how trick people into giving us their attention. And then from there, I would convert that into followers, token holders, and so on and so forth. And there's obviously a lot of other things that I would do with them. I'm strictly talking content right now, but in terms of referral programs and all kinds of stuff like that, it would be pretty fun. But I think I'll kind of leave it at that. And I think we've done a decent job here of kind of summarizing in the last few minutes what I would do. And I suppose the last thing would be like the developers, right? So that's where I would lean much more into, I don't know if my channels would change very much. Maybe like the Google searches themselves would change, maybe like any websites that I would target. I would still probably focus on YouTube, but uh, I might pursue other channels that are very like developer heavy within crypto. but I don't know at the top of my head where those people hang out. There's like DAOs and stuff too, like developer DAO. So that would be like another channel where it's like, hey, can we do something together as a distribution channel and push certain content out that way? Mm, but in general, it's the same process, right? Just kind of looking at it from a developer perspective. So where are these developers hanging out, and what is the message that we need to get in front of them to push them across the bridge? And I just have to throw one more thing in here that didn't fully explain. So the reason you want to figure this out, it's like partly because you want to figure out which platform to post on, and many times that's going to be obvious. But the other thing is, if you ever want to resort to advertising to amplify, for example, on YouTube, there's many different ways that you can target people. And that's where this sort of information is very useful, right? So when it comes to like targeting based on YouTube specific things, like subscribers of a channel, like these things are always changing. So I don't know if this is still the case, but it was the case for sure that I could run ads on YouTube and I could target people that watch a specific video, and I could target people that were watching a specific channel, right? So the thing is, the targeting now goes much beyond that. So you could target people who visit websites similar to Wall Street Journal. You could target the same thing based on apps. So I might put like apps here. So you could target people that use applications similar to Binance or CoinMarketCap, as an example. So that's why some of the stuff that might have seen like not directly useful here, the reason I put it here is because of that reason. So you use this information, one, to choose your platforms, and maybe for like indirect targeting, and sometimes maybe super direct targeting, like using a specific search phrase for running Google ads. And in general, I just think there's a big opportunity here to get new people to find out about you by using advertising, because I don't think many projects in crypto are using advertising at all. And if you've got some sort of a funnel that actually works, like you've got some laid out journey for some type of person to go through and come out the way you want them to on the other side, and you know how much it costs you and you're willing to pay that price, then advertising can be a great way to do that. So just wanted to fill in that gap, like especially when it comes to like Google searches and websites. There's like, yeah, you can target people based on their behavior online, because guess what? YouTube is owned by Google, which owns Chrome, which means they have all kinds of data about what you're doing on the internet. For that reason, they can serve you ads based on that behavior. Okay. So I think we can wrap it here. The final thing that you would do is you would put all this stuff into, like, I like to do it in a Notion, sort of like Kanban board, and then I make a card for every piece of content that's going to be made, and then you could tag it up with, like, the awareness level. You could target up with which target audience it's for, and then you could just rank them in terms of priority, which one you're going to be working on first. And there was one more thing that I wanted to say too, by the way, which was that, coming back to quality versus quantity, I heard this analogy in the past where it's like, hey, if let's say you made a movie back in the day, right? You went out, you got a cast, you had a script, you put a team together, and you did like a small launch, right? 15 theaters, like put it in the cinema in the States, right? And it crushes, like the movie's awesome, right? Like, what do you do next? Do you try to scale the same movie into 2,000 theaters nationwide? Or do you just shut down and go make your next movie? Right? And it sounds kind of stupid, right? Because the answer is so obvious that, like, of course, we made something that obviously kind of like achieved its objective. Of course, the next step is just to get it in front of as many people as we humanly possibly can. But I think that's not actually what most people default to. For some reason, like most of us would probably default to, like, okay, we did it. Now, like, what's the next piece of content we want to do? So my point here is, like, a lot of your content strategy, very often you end up spending like maybe 50% of your time figuring out what the content is and making the content. And like, very likely, if you do things right, you'll be spending half the time just getting more distribution for that high quality content that you already made, that sort of achieved the objective that you did, instead of like going and making another piece. Like, you should be spending half of your time getting the same stuff in front of more people. You get it? So, whew, we've had a long day here. As you can see, if you've got like 5 different audiences and you're going to do this thing for all of them and then brainstorm different, like, I didn't even get specific here, right? Like, I kind of left it at like the category. So, like, security would be a category. The next step would be to be like, okay, we're going to make content about this aspect. So, that's where you get into like, here's the title of the thing. And then we go and make it, right? So, the title of the thing, like, here, here's how we got, or we got 100,000 users in the last blah, blah, blah. Here's the content, right? So we kind of skipped that part. Otherwise, we'd be here all freaking day. But we did the awareness. So we did our target audiences. We did what we want them to do. We went into the different awareness levels. We made sort of categories of content that is going to push them across the bridge. Then the step that we skipped would be to go into each category and figure out specific titles of content that we're going to make for each category. And then we do the same thing for all of our different audiences. Then we look at where do they hang out, just to build a bit of an idea of like what's the format going to be of our content and how could we potentially get it in front of other people in terms of maybe using keyword targeted advertising, or maybe even approaching some of these to do like, whatever, some sort of partnership if they have your audience, for example, and so on and so forth. And if you do this, and once you find stuff that really works, you just make sure you get it in front of more and more people, you will eventually find that more and more people are coming across the bridge and taking the actions that you wish they took. That is how you do a content marketing strategy for a crypto project. I got to go lay down. It's been a beast of a video. Hope this was valuable to you, and have a great day. I shall see you soon.